Colin McNeil, President and CEO for the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Power and Potential. I would like to welcome you to the State of Adolescents, Healthier Together. Thank you so much for joining us today for a discussion about our teens' mental health. It goes without saying that this past year has been extremely challenging for young people. The disruption of routine, social isolation, fear of becoming ill, and financial struggles brought on by the pandemic has truly taken a toll on young people's mental health. As we emerge from the pandemic, we are still faced with many challenges in adolescent health. This is not a new crisis. It is one that GCAPP has confronted for more than 25 years. It is unacceptable. 1 in 5 of Georgia's children and youth live in poverty, and historic unemployment and losses of entire industries will only make this worse. 16% of high schoolers don't graduate on time, and the inevitable academic slide brought on by the pandemic will not help this statistic. While much progress has been made, teen birth rates in Georgia remain alarming, and sexually transmitted infection cases continue to rise for adolescents. This past year also has taken a toll on adolescents' mental health. According to the recent data, 39% of Georgia households report having children who felt anxious or on edge nearly every day. 25% of Georgia households reported having children who felt down, depressed, or hopeless nearly every single day. While rates were down in 2020, suicide is still the second leading cause of death among adolescents and young adults, and only 59% of youth are able to easily access mental health treatment and counseling. What impacts our youth impacts us all of us, parents, educators, mentors, business leaders, policymakers, and those of us who just simply care about the well-being of our youth. We must make a positive impact to ensure young people remain on a path to a healthy future. That is why I am proud to announce the launch of GCAPP's new strategic plan, Impact 2025, our boldest and most ambitious effort to advance adolescent health in Georgia. I hope you will join us in this movement to impact the lives of thousands of young people, because Georgia's youth need all of us. Again, thank you for joining us for the State of Adolescents. I would like to thank our founder, Jane Fonda, our amazing board of directors, and all of our guest speakers for being here today. Thank you so much for your support. Please stay tuned as you can learn more about Impact 2025. Enjoy the show.
Every young person deserves to grow into their own. Every child deserves a chance to thrive. Every child has tremendous power and potential. At GCAPP, we are proud of the role we play in all of this. For more than 25 years in Georgia, GCAPP has been a leader in improving adolescent health and a social innovator of proven, effective programs that empower and inspire youth. Working with hundreds of our partners throughout the state, each year we impact tens of thousands of young people as they journey through adolescence and onto promising pathways into the rest of their lives. We leverage the power of partnerships to help youth mitigate risks that could result in long-term negative consequences that are difficult to overcome. Young people in Georgia need support now more than ever. Georgia ranks 38th in the nation for child well-being, and childhood obesity, depression, suicide, repeat teen pregnancy, sexually transmitted infections, substance abuse are all at crisis levels for youth. To help combat these negative trends, we need to reach more youth, more parents, and more professionals to make a greater impact in the lives of some of our most vulnerable citizens. We are proud to share our new strategic plan, Impact 2025, Advancing Adolescent Health. The most enterprising and forward-looking plan in our history, Impact 2025 will deliver on key critical objectives. Focused on mission, internal processes, financial stability, and organizational capacity, by 2025, GCAPP will provide programs and services to 360,000 youth, 200,000 parents, and 15,000 youth-serving professionals. We will bring on 100 new strategic partnerships, allowing us to expand into 80 additional counties. We will work with communities across Georgia's entire youth ecosystem to expand our prevention programs and services, giving young people knowledge and skills, resources and opportunities, and adult allies for the many challenges they face. True power and the potential for change lie in our youth, but they need all of us. GCAPP is certain that if we educate, empower, support, and connect them, they will create meaningful change in their lives and communities. We invite you to join GCAPP along with hundreds of partners as we strive to achieve the ambitious goals of Impact 2025. And as we continue our mission to improve the overall health and well-being for young people in Georgia to ensure a more powerful future for us all.
Hi, I'm Muntrice Ransom. I'm a longtime champion of GCAPP and proud to serve on the Power Society Steering Committee. I want to thank my fellow steering committee members who have helped plan today's event. As you've just heard from Ronald and the video, GCAPP has launched a bold and audacious plan to amp up our impact for Georgia's youth. But we need your help. If you're able to do so, please give a gift of any amount to support the programming that will equip young people with the tools and resources necessary to make healthy choices for a healthy future. Visit gcapp.org/donate to support the Power Society Annual Fund and help power GCAPP's strategic plan forward. Lastly, I want to give a huge thank you to our Power Society members. We are tremendously grateful for your generosity. And now I have the honor of turning it over to our visionary founder, the amazing Jane Fonda. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for signing on today. What an important topic. What a great discussion that we're going to have today. And I sure wanted to be here for it. The statistics that Ronald just gave us are really cause for concern. And I think we all have to put our shoulder to the wheel and try to do all we can to help the youth of Georgia and really to have Georgia serve as an example of what can be done in other states. So thank you, Ronald and GCAPP, for keeping important trends and topics on the table. This is what the state of adolescence does so well. It provides a platform to bring awareness to certain issues. It elevates it, it expands it, it informs, it gives us strategies, programs, and solutions. I'm really happy to be here to be part of it today. And, I think about when I founded GCAPP, it's hard to believe, over 25 years ago, the intersectionality and the drilling down of all things adolescence was just so important then. And now it's even more important because everything is interconnected and can make or break a healthy adolescence. Getting to the root of problems, that was my vision for GCAPP, unearthing the root causes that would lead to a teen pregnancy or dropping out of school or a teen endangering themselves. We always wanted to get to the bottom of things that get in the way of young people fully realizing their potential. So I'm so pleased that GCAPP is taking this path more and more. And I don't think that there's any topic more important than what we're going to be talking about today. So much is going on in all of our lives, but every single report about the pandemic says that all the cascading effects are taking a special toll on tweens, teens, and young adults. More so, it seems, than at any other time, from isolation, anxiety, to depression, to self-harm. We have to wonder about the lasting effects of these difficult, bruising times on our children. And we have to do all we can to mitigate it. We all want to know what we can do to mitigate it, to help our kids and ourselves and our communities. And so today we're going to hear from experts and from youth. But first, I'm so pleased to introduce our speaker, Sophia Bush. What I really admire and love about Sophia is that she's an unapologetic activist. She's constantly using her celebrity and platforms for something bigger, something profound. She's really plugged into the challenges that young people face. Sophia talks openly and honestly about mental health, self-care, and erasing the stigma associated with mental health. You know, throughout the pandemic, Sophia's been using her platform to bring awareness to all kinds of social concerns, including issues of mental health, particularly the mental health of young people. She is a visionary and a leader, and whether it's mental health, the environment, poverty, health, education, human rights, women's rights, all of these are on Sophia's radar. They're all part of her journey. And I am just thrilled, Sophia, that your journey has brought you to GCAPP today. I welcome you wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Jane, for that wonderful introduction and really for everything that you do for Georgia, specifically youth in Georgia with GCAPP for 25 years and counting now. And thank you for everything that you do for young people all throughout the country and truly all over the globe. You are remarkable. And there is untold benefit from your years of irrepressive, determined activism and standing up for what's right, no matter what. I jumped at the chance to be here when GCAPP invited me to be a part of this important event. And forgive me for reading notes off of my computer screen. I'm a bit nervous because I'm so thrilled to be here with you all. Improving the wellness and health of youth, and subsequently their health in adulthood, requires our collective action. From families to schools, businesses to public agencies, health agencies, and all other community organizations. We have to do this together. I know that GCAPP works with every facet of the Georgia youth ecosystem, and that is exactly how it should be, and that's exactly who's joining us at this event. Bringing together experts, parents, teachers, school counselors, high school students, college students, youth advocates, clinicians, and youth themselves. It takes us all. Nothing, absolutely nothing, is more important than the emotional well-being and mental health of children. And just like all of you, I'm here to absorb all that I can too, because one of my greatest joys in life and as a professional adult is that I get to connect with young people and learn from them and offer whatever ear or whatever amount of inspiration I might be able to. So I take this opportunity to heart. I remember being a kid and just being so inspired by icons like you, Jane, who were relentless in their care for the planet, and by mentors like my favorite teachers at school who taught me how to look at the world and be curious. And it's that curiosity and that passion for our future that I see in youth today. The way they show up at marches and protests and talk about the environment and justice. I feel like the future is in good hands, but we have to protect them and support them so that they can be the leaders that they envision themselves to be. We know that this pandemic, with its cascading effects, has altered all of our lives in so many unwelcomed ways, but our youth seems to be the hardest hit. There's a corresponding increase in anxiety, loneliness, depression, suicide, academic pressure, economic stress, kids working to help support their families, and then social injustice and so many other influences. It's a lot. The pandemic has left a lot of people with themselves, dwelling in anxiety, and kids are isolated from their friends. They're not able to find community the way they used to, and it's particularly hard for many of them. The pandemic compounded a series of unrelenting stressors for youth that were already trying to cope with these on the daily. Peer pressure, bullying, not fitting in, vulnerable family environments. They were trying to cope the best way they know how before the world stopped and brought on this unbelievable stress and severe and lasting mental effects. Two disturbing statistics that I've learned this year. Since the pandemic, mental health-related hospital visits for youth are up 44%, and 39,000 kids from 6th to 12th grade attempted suicide in 2019. These numbers are too much, and they speak for themselves. Our kids need our help. Now, based on my interaction with youth over the years, I believe the best thing we can do for our kids in these tough times and in our everyday lives is to make sure young people in our lives feel safe and feel seen and feel heard. Even when there's no actual conversation being had, chances are in those times of silence, they're telling us everything we need to know. We just need to listen. We need to lend a great big collective ear. It is all of our responsibility. One of the things that's really resonated with me over and over again through the years is that the power of talking to youth, observing them, keeping the lines of communication open in a non-judgmental way, and being intentional in connecting with them and trying to understand their feelings and anxieties, especially in these heightened times, cannot be overstated. To all the young people here, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for caring so much about your communities and this planet that we live on. You all inspire me so much and make me feel so sure that the future is going to be all right. And I really, truly hope that as your collective community, we can be the shoulder that you need to lean on, we can be the ear to listen to you, and we can make you feel as supported and loved as you deserve. You matter so much. We cherish you deeply, and I really, really appreciate you including me.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Hi, thank you, Sophia.
I'm so happy to be here with you. And when we made that video, I wasn't sure that this day was going to work in person, and to be able to actually sit in conversation with you feels like such a treat. So thank you for having me.
You too, Sophia, thanks. I love what you said, the importance of listening. And, you know, there's listening and then there's listening. They're so smart, right? I mean, they know when you're pretending to listen, but you're really thinking about something else. What's important listening for young people is listening from the heart, really hearing. People need to feel heard and seen and safe. You use the word cherished. Can make all the difference in the world, because this is such a hard time right now. This is one of the, maybe the only times in our lifetimes, and then I've lived a long life since the 1930s, where there is a convergence of crises. You know, there's the crises of racial violence, there's the crises of health, there's the economic inequality, the crisis of democracy, and then overarching it all is the climate crises. And boy, does this come down hard on young people. So I'm just so glad we're going to have this conversation today. You know what else I love, Sophia? That your new podcast is called Work in Progress.
Oh, thank you.
I love that. I feel like I'm almost 84 and I feel like a work in progress. I think it's very good to know that you're a work in progress, constantly open and learning and receiving, right?
Yes, yes, I do too. And I think if you are willing to consider yourself and those around you that way, you can treat yourself and everyone around you with a little more grace and offer yourself more curiosity. And it is, to your point about listening, it's that kind of curiosity that I believe kids really deserve.
Yes.
So often you see adults looking at kids and saying, oh, no, you can't think that, or there's no way you're into that, or you're too young for this, when in reality, their lives simply are what they are. And we need to take our own sort of fears and anxieties and beliefs and perhaps prejudices away and just listen to them when they tell us about their experiences, about the things going on in their lives. And I'm just so incredibly grateful that you all here at GCAPP are doing this work. You said it earlier, this can really be a model for other states around the country. I really think we can do incredible work for young people and show other people that it's possible. And I'm truly just thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much. How old are you? You're so wise.
Oh, you're so sweet. I'm 38, which is weird. I still kind of feel like a college kid.
Well, you look like a college kid. Anyway, just so our audience knows, Sophia is going to be joining the panel discussion. So maybe we'll get started, okay?
Sure, let's do it.
Joining us is Atiba Mui. How do you pronounce your name, sir? Buiwan. Atiba Buiwan, what a beautiful name. Executive Director of the Zeist Foundation. Thank you for being here. Nathaniel Smith, founder of the Chief Equity Officer for Partnership for Southern Equity. Dr. Andrea Meyer Stinson is the Associate Program Director at Mercer University School of Medicine's Masters of Family Therapy program. We have Dr. Kenneth Zeff, Executive Director for Learn for Life. Isla Burks is the high school student. She's a GCAPP Youth Advisory Council member and GCAPP Youth Ambassador. And finally, Tiffany George, a college freshman at Mercer University and also a GCAPP Youth Ambassador and part of our Youth Advisory Council. I am so grateful to all of you for taking time to join GCAPP's State of Adolescence panel today. And let's get started. For our first question, I'd like to ask you, Dr. Stinson, is there a set of specific situations that's driving this, that's driving so many people, so many young people, to so much emotional unwellness? Dr. Stinson?
Yes, and thank you for being here. As a teen who grew up in Georgia, I'm not a teen, but growing up as a teen in Georgia, I'm happy to be here. Yes, I think you and Ms. Bush really highlighted the cumulative effects that we're seeing right now of the pandemic, of racial and social injustices that are really impacting so many different people. And I attribute a lot of it back to a concept we talk about called toxic stress. I work in a medical school, and so there's this idea that the mind and the body are interconnected. And when you experience so much stress every day, repeatedly, over and over and over, it affects your body and it affects your mental health. And I think we're just seeing with the pandemic an amplification of this toxic stress and how it can pile up on families, on communities, and on our teens in a way that leads to these outcomes like more suicidality and more depression and more anxiety.
Thank you. Is part of the problem that many children are, could those of you put yourselves on mute unless you're actually speaking, okay? So there won't be any bleeding in of unwanted noise. Thank you. I'm going to ask this of you, Sophia. Is part of the problem that many children are finding themselves taking on adult roles in this pandemic, working to try to help the family make ends meet, trying to go to school? There's so much pressure. What do you think, Sophia?
I definitely think so. I think and perhaps it helps for us as adults, right? We know that the lines of when we're working and when we're with our families, what work hours mean have disappeared in the pandemic. You're meant to be accessible and reachable all the time. And if you consider how hard that is for us, how many times you have a friend saying, I just feel crazy. I don't know what's happening anymore. And I'm just in these four walls. I think about what that feels like for young people, for people who are at the developmental stages, even of neurological development, where as a teen, the world around you feels in your brain like the whole planet. What happens when the world around you reduces to your home or your apartment? What happens when the world around you ceases to contain people who you go to vent about family stress, about angst, about how hard school is? The pressure is so immense. And when I think about that kind of anxiety caused by that reduction, I also think about the ways in which kids and families tend to want to be helpful, especially older teens. If you're 14, 15, 16, maybe you're a 19-year-old living at home while you're going to community college, of course you're going to want to help your parents or your family that you live with manage what's happening inside the home, because everyone is under so much more stress. So to me, it feels a bit like a pressure cooker. And I can only imagine the intensity that this year has been putting all of these young people under.
Yeah. Yeah. Sue Ann, if there's anything you can do about the weird sound, am I the only one that's hearing this? There's this, see if you can fix it. Hyla, do you want to add anything to what Sophia just said?
Of course, I think that right now we have to be more receptive, we have to be more understanding, and we have to be able to develop that interstate track mindset where you're thinking both forwards and backwards, and where you're able to accept diversity, cultivate diversity, and be a leader in everything that you're doing. I think that 2020, as part of the earlier part of 2021, including up to now, we've learned to be more aware of everyone's safe space and understand what everyone's going through. And we have to kind of develop a mindset where we're receptive of everyone's feelings. We're checking up on everybody as well of ourselves, because this pandemic has been waiting on everybody, from a high school student to seeing it through my parents, through my friends. We have to check up on each other and make sure that we're all accountable for our well-being, our mindset, and we just have to be able to love each other like we love ourselves and love our family members, because life is so short. And I think that that's the beautiful thing about life. We're able to learn lessons, and we're able to love everyone, and we're able to have a second chance to get things right.
Dr. Stinson, your head is nodding a lot too. Do you want to add anything?
Well, I was just thinking about, how hard it is to be a parent during the last year and a half, and to both handle my own stress and the stress of my children and the stress of my parents and my community stress. And I think for me, that is where it's building up and it's accumulated over this time. And we're also isolated, and the things we used to do to connect, we can't do as easily. And connection, for me, and I know for a lot of others, is what helps us reduce our stress and helps us build resilience. But to connect virtually is a very different, process than to do it in person. So it's been a tough year, Jane, for everybody, but it's tough for parents and the teens, for sure.
What about the stressors that are put on LGBTQ youth and Black youth? I mean, are we seeing a difference in their levels of stress? I'm sure we are. And what's behind this? Nathaniel, can you go first?
Well, again, thank you for this opportunity to share. This is a powerful panel, and I'm just honored to have an opportunity to participate on it. I think for us to truly understand the stress that Black youth and historically disinvested youth of color are experiencing, we have to look backwards in order to look forward. We have to understand that before COVID, there was the stress of structural inequity. There was the stressors caused by structural racism. And those stressors were historic. They were generational. And those stressors caused many, many seen and unseen challenges that Black youth have had to deal with for generations. And so the work around COVID-19 and the additional stressors that Black youth and historically disinvested youth of color are experiencing are just icing. It's icing on the cake of an unfortunate history of structural injustice that Black youth and historically disinvested youth of color have had to deal with and manage for well over 400 years in this nation. And so hopefully this experience and what we're dealing with COVID-19 will focus, will finally encourage us to go backwards and understand the role of history in the compounding of the challenges that young kids of color are facing today.
Atiba, do you want to add anything to this? And again, I want to ask people, if you're not talking, put yourself on mute so there won't this bleeding across weird sounds. Atiba, go ahead.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Jane. And again, I'd like to thank everybody for being part of this great group of folks addressing the issues of adolescence and the stresses, because I can remember back when I was a teenager, I learned the Serenity Prayer. And I think about how much that had helped me then and even now. And it gets to this issue that teens don't have control over their lives, and they can't wait to be adults when they can have control and make decisions and act on them. But again, when you are living in a household with parents and family members, you don't have that kind of control, and you have to find some serenity to help you. And I often try to think back to what it was like then, because the work I do today in helping young people, I want to remember. And I learned transcendental meditation back then as a way to help me deal with the stress. And I think, again, what Nathaniel pointed out is so true, that LGBTQ youth, Asian youth, Latino, Latinx youth, African-American youth, I mean, really, the stresses they're dealing with from the society on top of this health pandemic and the economic stress, I mean, it's really overwhelming, you know.
I have found, I've been doing this weekly Fire Drill Fridays to raise the sense of urgency around the climate crisis. Mm-hmm. And a lot of young people have been guests on my show, on my program. And one of the things that I have found from virtually all of them is activism has allowed them to overcome their feeling of depression and extinction anxiety, is what some psychologists are calling it. Activism, when you know that you are doing all that you personally can about something, really, really helps with depression. And it's why GCAPP has recently begun a program of activism, encouraging young people to be activists. Anybody want to speak to this issue of activism? And I think also, Atiba and Nathaniel, after the murder of George Floyd, the fact that there were so many young people that took to the streets, I think it really helped them feel that they were taking a little bit of power back, right? Everybody's Dr. Zen, Dr. Kenzef. Zen would be good too.
I've been called worse than that. I know. I appreciate you lifting up this topic, Jane. It's so important, and your advocacy means so much to so many people. I mean, I think as we look back, as we emerge from this pandemic, the impact on everything's going to come back, right? The hospitality will come back, the economy will come back, but the impact on youth, I think, will be with us, and we'll be unpacking that for a while. I think, I love this idea of activism and connectivity. The one thing that is the root of mental health issues so many times is isolation. And that's all we've reinforced to children over the past year, in part for their safety, to isolate. But to be able to connect with each other, connect with the adults, in the schoolhouse, in their home, in their community, to be able to make that connection happen again, that's really going to be the key to us coming back. And I think activism is a great way to do that. It's a great way to find like-minded folks who believe and share your passion, instead of just retreating like we've been telling folks to do, to actually lean in. Is really going to be, I think, the path forward, because these adverse childhood experiences that kids have, they're cumulative. That's why it matters if you're an underserved youth, if you're underrepresented. When you have economic insecurity, food insecurity, all those things build up over time. It really has an impact. And so I love the idea of the call to activism, to get engaged, to lean in, get connected with your peers and with your community.
Taking back agency in some way. Tiffany, do you agree with this? You want to add anything here?
Yes, I absolutely agree. But from my own personal experience of not being able to engage in the activism last summer, of being confined to the house just to try to stay safe and protect my household, that definitely had the opposite effect on me, whereas it just made me feel less engaged, more anxious about things, like I had less control over what was happening and that I was more isolated. So activism is definitely the key out of these negative mental health spaces, but it's so hard to find a balance for everyone with the ongoing threat of COVID-19. And we just never know like how far can I push the boundaries? How far can I go out and still protect my household? So that was just something that I know a lot of youth struggled with, of just finding that balance and where we can step into activism but still be safe.
Right on. This question now is for all of you. You know, you never know what a child is going through, right? And many aren't going to just come out and tell the adults in their lives what's going on. How does one tap in? What can parents do to be more aware? What can those do who work directly with youth? And this is for all of you, who wants to go first.
Well, I'll go first. I know that for me, the best solution was just having my parents listen to me and having them affirm my feelings. And I know at the beginning, my mom always told me that it's not just me going through everything, it's the whole world adjusting to COVID and all the stressors. And while I recognized that she was trying to comfort me, at first I thought that was kind of mitigating my emotions and telling me, like, kind of invalidating my emotions. But eventually we got to the point where it was more of she was listening and just affirming how I was feeling and reminding me that it's okay to acknowledge your feelings. But we just can't stay in those dark places, because that leads to different mental health issues. So just having parents and youth serving professionals listen to you goes so far.
Nathaniel, do you want to add anything?
Well, I was just going to say that, like civic agency, youth voice has to be cultivated and nurtured. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the more strong it becomes. And so the more that we have an opportunity to position young people, whether it be at home or in the broad community, to use their civic agency, to use their voice, the more comfortable they will be in articulating their concerns. Unfortunately, on many occasions, young people have been relegated to the kids' table at Thanksgiving. We would rather see them more than hear them. And the more we're able to help to facilitate that opportunity for young people to be heard, and to even more so position them to understand how to use their voice, and not just to be heard, but how they can be strategic in using that voice in order to get the type of outcomes they want to see in the world. I think that is the work that we have to focus on today.
Dr. Stinson, do you want to add anything?
Yes. I was thinking about, I think most parents have the intention of wanting to support and love and nurture their children. And I think the challenge is when parents are in communities or in situations where their resources are minimized or not available to them. And I talk about, to really help a child emotionally regulate, or a teen emotionally regulate, you as an adult have to be able to emotionally regulate as well. And I have 4 kids, and I quite often have struggles emotionally regulating myself. And so I think being really open about, it's not just about behaviors, it's about what's behind behaviors. What are you feeling? What are you needing? What matters to you as a young adult or as a teen? And as a parent, connecting with that, so I know when things that matter to them are being dropped off. If my young adult or teen really loves something that I'm not into, but I acknowledge that and learn about it, if they're unhappy and that love of that goes away, I will notice that if I'm really connected. So those are some things that I think would help parents. Resources, but also that emotional regulation piece. It's so important.
Speaking of emotional regulation, Atiba, I may ask you to recite the Serenity Prayer at the end of this for all of us. Would anybody like to add, Sophia, anybody want to add on to this question about what can we do? What can parents do?
I think a lot about what I felt like being a teenager, and maybe I see it in parallel because I have two 11-year-old twin nieces, and their dads will talk to me about how sometimes they tell me things that they don't tell their dads, and I think about how as a kid, and who knows where we learn it. There was a fear sometimes to share with my parents because I wanted to be a good student, I wanted to be a good girl, and I wanted to have it all together, and the things that were most helpful for me, to your point, Dr. Stinson, this idea that my parents would notice if I was being quiet about something, or if I hadn't spoken about my homework in a while, maybe that was an indicator that I was feeling overwhelmed by it. Whatever it might be for each individual, I think that just creating an open pathway in whatever way works in your house and what works with your family. And I'm sure you've experienced this too, Jane. Interestingly enough, the first show that I worked on, I played a high school girl for 4 years, and I would have young people, but also their parents, come and talk to me about, oh, this episode, I watched it with my parents and it opened a conversation for us about teen sexuality. It opened a conversation for us about the first time I saw someone, using narcotics. It opened a conversation about whatever it might be. So it's been interesting to hear how sometimes parents see their kids watch an episode of something and then say, have you ever experienced that? So I guess I throw these all out there to say, in my experience, not as a parent, but as an aunt alone, it's proximal at best. You sort of have to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And whether it's through someone else's content or story, or an absence of conversation suddenly, or just more silence than you're used to, however you can get in, I encourage the trying. And I also would encourage the young people who are with us today to know that despite how scary it might feel to talk to your parents about something, all they want is to know you more. And maybe, to Tiffany's point, they might not have the language. I don't know that our parents have the language we all are so fortunate to have in our ever more connected sort of social media world. But if you can sit with them, you might be able to teach them something too. And more often than not, I hope, at least in your experience, they will try to meet you where you are. You're on mute, Jane.
Oh, goodness. Let's see. I don't see that I'm on mute.
You've got it now. You're back.
I'm muted now. During this time when there's a lot of television is being looked at, and the idea that parents can use it as a teaching opportunity is great. Oh, so maybe GCAPP can help on our parents, the part of our website that goes to parents, certain television shows or episodes that make good teaching opportunities. Maybe we could share that with parents. That would be, yeah, that's good. Thank you. Thank you for that. So this is for all of you too. What is one positive aspect of the pandemic and the social distancing that you would like to maintain? Is there anybody have any thoughts on that?
I do.
Okay, I
think that the most positive aspect about this pandemic has shown everybody that you are so much stronger than what you think that you are. I think that with us being home and us deeming the impossible and figuring out that it's possible to manage your work life, manage your school life, managing your professional life, your personal life with your children or with your siblings and your brothers and sisters, I think that it's shown you that we have more time management skills on our hands. We're able to accomplish more, and we're able to dig down deeply in ourselves and find that inner confidence and that inner strength to carry on each day. So I think that the most positive aspect that I'd like to keep with myself is that I am my biggest inspiration. I'm my biggest best friend, and I'm my biggest support role. And I feel like as adolescents, that's important to know, considering the many ups and downs that we go through mentally, physically, bodily, personally, publicly. We sometimes seek out the strength in others that we sometimes need to find in ourselves. And I think that knowing that we have to be our biggest support system and find the love that we search for so deeply within us and our family members. We have to remember that. And I think that we have to get to a point where we understand how to communicate with each other, that we can't lose that aspect of communication. We can't lose that aspect of social interaction, even though we're still shut in and some of us are still quarantining and some of us are still wary of going out. We have to maintain that social communication, but we still can't lose track of ourselves. We have to remain humble and we have to remain in that safe space and knowing that we can always talk to people, we can always understand ourselves, and that we always have to approach everything with peace.
Dr. Zeff, anything you would like to maintain that you've experienced during this pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are, and I love the asset focus of the question. That's not all, it's not all doom and gloom. I think one piece that I would tell parents to keep focused on is, over the past year, parents have had a whole new perspective on what it means to be a teacher and what learning looks like at home. And so if teachers now are not this distant, learning is not something that happens behind a box or behind a screen somewhere. Parents have been able to see it up close. And I would encourage all the parents to leverage that time they've had to gain to know what's happening in their child's school, to stay engaged, and really reach out to teachers. I think there's this misnomer that teachers don't want to be bothered by what parents have to say, and teachers don't always do a great job of opening themselves up to that interaction. But that interaction is going to be critical. I think it's something that both Nathaniel and Atiba have said, just this, getting connected, getting that student agency in. But we need parents to get connected with their teachers and ask questions. And if a child is struggling, that news doesn't age well quietly. You need to engage with your teacher, find out what's working, find out what the teacher is seeing, and let the teacher know that you're a support for that student too, because we all want the same thing. We all want students to have agency to succeed. And I think engaging with teachers, engaging in the learning process is something that I hope continues as we emerge from the pandemic.
Experts have stated that having a routine was extremely beneficial during the pandemic, a regular routine. Many young people they're experiencing boredom and lack of motivation. What tips or strategies do you have for young people and their caregivers as they transition safely back into society? And again, this is for all of you.
Can I answer that question?
Sure, yeah.
But I want to tie it to the other questions too, because I'm a parent. I know Nathaniel's a parent. I know that Kenneth is a parent. And I just want to say a quick something about the role of fathers, because we really are critical in helping out not only our kids, but young people in this time. And the thing I remember most about being a teenager is how we listen to songs. And on my way in today, I was listening to one of these songs that came out back when GCAPP was formed. And it says, if you love me, say it. If you trust me, do it. If you love me, say it. If you trust me, do it. And again, it pains me to think about all the young people who are in families where they're not being told that they're loved, where they're not feeling trusted. And I really think that it's important, especially in this time when we're all so close together due to the pandemic, that we express, our feelings of love for children. And I just want to say that in my civic life and volunteering, I spend a lot of time with young people riding bicycles. And so one of the things that's a great outcome of this pandemic is people going outside in the great outdoors and experiencing Mother Nature and having that heal. And this relates to the last question, because the young people I've been riding with, last year, we went to Alabama to the Equal Justice Initiative Museum and Memorial. And we came back to Georgia the same day that Ahmaud Arbery was killed.
Oh, God.
And as a result, we started doing bike rides in Brunswick, Georgia last year, and every month we do it. And our young people, as a result of being involved in those bike rides, have helped Ahmaud Arbery's family feel better about what's happening. And our young people are feeling better. And I think, again, to me, we just have to be creative and find ways for young people to do things so they have some sense of agency around what's happening in this world.
Yes. Agency. What is the name of, I used to hike in a Kennesaw, is there a Kennesaw mountain?
Yes.
Taking kids into, you said the word, Mother Nature, taking young people into nature, I think can be so healing. And thank you for bringing that up. Does anybody want to add anything?
One of the things I'm so sorry, Andrea, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to be a little controversial and say I think boredom is not a bad thing. I think it's actually a good thing for kids. I say kids because I have younger children, but for teens and kids to kind of learn how to find something they love to do outside of technology, learn to do something outside they've never done before. I know my daughter learned how to do an aerial, during this last year and a half. We have a very privileged existence, but I think she wouldn't have done that otherwise. And I want to harp back to what Atiba was saying about, one of the benefits of the last year and a half for me as a privileged white person is to say, I need to take more responsibility for my community. I have to do more. I have to love all parts of my community and not just the parts that I interact with, and ask really about trauma, about historical trauma, about community trauma. And that's something that we've done here in Middle Georgia with our Resilient Middle Georgia group, is really ask those kind of questions in the midst of the pandemic, because it's shown a lot of us that we are missing that piece of that conversation. When we're talking about trauma and mental health, we're not getting to the root of it. And so I feel that this last year and a half has really been a huge teaching moment for me and my kids about how to treat others and how to love others and how to love our community in a whole way, in a holistic way. So
thank you so much for that, Dr. Stinson. I recently read a really, really important book by Heather McGhee. It's called, Atiba, you know what I'm talking about? It's called The Sum of Us. And she really goes through the history of white supremacy and racism and just makes it so clear that this is not a zero-sum situation where if they over there win some rights, it's going to take away from us. The fact is that racism hurts all of us. And it just occurred to me that it might be a good thing to recommend that parents read this book, Heather McGhee, The Sum of Us, and to be able to teach our children how racism hurts all of us. There's so many examples. For example, in the 50s, huge amounts of money were spent building enormous, fancy public swimming pools that the communities could enjoy. But when Black children began swimming in them, they were emptied out of the water and paved over. Well, it wasn't just Black kids that suffered from that. The white kids lost their place to swim too. And that's just one example, but it might be a good thing for parents to read so they'll learn how to teach their children. This is not a zero-sum game. We all lose from racism. What should parents and caregivers look for if they believe their young person is in mental distress? And I'm asking this of Dr. Stinson.
I teach several classes on teens, and I often show the interview with the Columbine shooter's mother, and forgive me, I can't remember her name. And she talks about noticing small things, but just just saying, oh, you know, he's an adolescent, he's going through a tough time. And that interview has really hit me as a parent to say, you ask, you're curious, you don't interrogate, but you're curious. Hey, I noticed you're having a tough day. Do you want to tell me what's going on? Instead of what's wrong with you? One of the things we talk about with trauma care is instead of saying what's wrong with you, ask what happened? What happened to you? And that to me opens up more room for conversation. But mainly if you notice that your teen is moodier, is more isolated, is struggling to connect like with the activities that he or she or they used to connect with, those little things add up over time, and noticing them is hard to do as a parent, but it's also one of your most important jobs as a parent.
Thank you for that, Dr. Stinson. Does anybody want to add anything to that? This is a really important question. Yes, Atiba?
I had a personal experience with my grandson, who, again, a great kid in high school, and he got addicted to Fortnite. And
what is Fortnite?
See, just like a lot of us old heads who are not online, it's one of these online games, you know? And I was shocked because, again, he's a great kid. And I found out when I was putting gas in my car, you know, those little advertisements they do at the gas stations. They said that year there were over 3,000 divorces in England due to Fortnite. So even adults were getting addicted. But again, this teenager who really a good kid. And so, you know, we basically did our little intervention, but we made sure, like Dr. Stinson was saying, that we were not criticizing him as a kid, as a person, but it was specific about this behavior. And we explained what addiction was, because he really didn't fully understand what that means, because again, people get addicted to all kinds of things. And it doesn't mean they're a bad person, you know, that again, it's a behavior that we have to try to control, because there's all kinds of addictions out there that can turn us into beings that are contrary to who we are. So I think it's really important to make that distinction.
So underlying all of this is the importance of paying attention. We have to really show up, right? Anybody want to? Yes, Dr. Zeff?
Yeah, I would just add that and really just building on both of those comments, that this is hard work, especially for parents who are really stretched themselves, who haven't had a lot of training. Ask for help. And that's why I think this event is so important, events like this, of lifting this up and destigmatizing these conversations. Call your school, go to your faith community, talk to your doctor, ask for help. And it could just be a question. It could be, you know, I feel like something's happening and I'm not sure. Can you point me in the direction of somebody that can get a little bit more engaged? If you wait, you know, nothing happens. If nothing good happens, the longer these things go untouched, and they get harder the further away we get. It's okay to ask for help. This is like you said at the outfront, Jane, this is a historic time. The dual pandemics, social justice, a reckoning with social justice, the health crisis, and all of the other swirling challenges that we're facing. It's okay. As a matter of fact, if you don't need help, that's surprising. If you don't need some resources now, some support, you know, then you're an outlier. That's great, but it's okay to ask for help. No shame in it. And the sooner you get plugged in with resources in our community, the better off you and your family will be.
So, you know, what do we do about the majority of men who think that asking for help is not a manly thing to do, right? Yes, Dr. Stinson.
Well, actually, it's funny. I just had that question with my husband. I think we need.
Why they die 5 years earlier than we do. They don't go to doctors, they don't ask for help.
I think we need to embed help into places that are new and different. So I work a lot with medical providers in Georgia to try and integrate behavioral health and to put mental health and behavioral health services in the schools, to put them in the doctor's office, to put them in the community, and to stop asking people to have to go somewhere else to find it. because that's a huge barrier to embed things inside the community and in those places. It makes sense. If you're a parent going to a pediatrician and there's someone there you can talk to, that's much easier to do than to have to go to another place physically somewhere different. So that's something I think, if we embed it and destigmatize it as part of a normal healthcare visit, I think more people will take advantage of that.
Yeah. Mental health issues are not a sign of your lack of worth, or that there's something wrong with you. I agree. So that's something to be activist about, to fight for more money for mental health professionals in schools. We have to get on old Uncle Joe about that. But at least we can have hope that the government will listen now, right? But what do people do who don't have doctors, which is like most Americans don't have a regular doctor? Anybody want to? Yeah, Atiba.
So Uncle Joe talked about was that healthcare is a human right. He said that last night. And I think this pandemic has proven that we need a national healthcare system so that everybody, no matter where you work, how old you are, what you look like, has access to healthcare.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that back when GCAPP was started to deal with teenage pregnancy, the foundation I work for, we started the first school-based health centers in Georgia, in the city of Atlanta. And since then, we expanded to over 55 school-based health centers in Georgia. And a lot of them are in rural areas and counties where there are no pediatricians.
Right.
And so this issue of access to healthcare is the other thing that we have to do. And telehealth has become important during the pandemic, but we have areas of the state where you don't have Wi-Fi access. And so the infrastructure bill that, President Joe talked about as well is the other thing that we really need to make an equitable society for all children, youth, and families to be healthy.
Thank you for that. Thank you. The pandemic has caused many young people to miss out on, the traditional events like proms and graduation, homecoming, sporting events. How can families recreate some of these special moments for their young person in our post-pandemic society? Isla? I'd like Isla to answer, then Tiffany, and then Dr. Zeff.
Okay, great. So I feel as if, of course, with COVID still around, you still are feeling cautious, still feeling wary of where you go, looking behind your shoulder because you never know what's lurking around the corner or past the tip of your nose. As my grandmother said, you can never see past the tip of your nose. So I feel like when you're recreating those special moments, I think that a lot of people should put themselves in the shoes of teens or adolescents if they can, and try to sympathize with us and see what the needs are, and try to understand how special that prom moment was for you if you had it, how special that basketball trophy championship winning moment was for you, and understand that just like you wanted those and just like you had that moment, we need those moments as well. So I think that being able to have socially distanced events outside on multiple days and just making sure that you celebrate and highlight youth more than ever these days, I think that's where we can start. I think having conversations in our community, having conversations in schools with counselors, with teachers, with adults, parents, and children within the grade levels within the community, understanding that foundation of communication and expressing it to not only just a certain group of children or just a certain group of the popular kids who are more outrageous and who are more extroverted. I think opening up to both introverted, extroverted children, letting them know that you have a platform to express yourself, understand where we're coming from, and understand where you're coming from. I think that that's where it starts. And when we're talking about prom, I'll use my school, for example. We're having an outside venue, socially distanced prom where we're having a masquerade ball where we have to wear masks, but we're still able to have that same special prom effect, even though we didn't have homecoming or some of these senior week events in the early part of the year. I think it's important that they're taking into consideration that it is our senior year. It's our last year of high school, and you have to make the most of life while you have it. So building that foundation is the most important aspect of that.
Thanks, Isla. Thank you for that. Tiffany, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think families and school systems should, one, think small, and two, think safe, because students and young people, we want to celebrate. It's celebration season right now with graduations, proms, even weddings, birthdays, everything. We want to celebrate. And after the year that we've had, I think we deserve to celebrate that we've made it this far. But I think just thinking small and inviting like close friends and family, people who you know have been safe with the pandemic, especially in the last 2 weeks leading up to the event, just so that everything can be celebratory and so that there are no tragedies after an event.
Dr. Kinson, do you want to add anything? You're nodding a lot.
I think that's just a byproduct of being a therapist. I apologize. Yes, I think Ayla and Tiffany, you're right. We need to find a way to help you connect. I mean, if I think about my best memories as an adolescent, it was those moments, and they do matter. So it is, I think a thing I would add is that we need to be aware that income inequality can lead to different resources for families to do this. And so a community needs to come together and say, this group has the resources to put on a prom. Let's help everybody in our community have that, not just the elite privileged group. And to do that together would really be helpful. But they did a great job answering, I think.
Beautiful, thank you. Nathaniel Smith, what are the health inequities that were exposed for young people during the pandemic, and what ways can young people increase awareness of these inequities?
Well, I mean, I think, one of the main challenges had to be with nutrition and food accessibility. One of the things that is unfortunate in many of our Black communities is that it's easier to get a honey bun than a head of lettuce. And so the challenges around mobility and nutrition created great issues and challenges in the community for young people. Also, to be completely honest, in many households, parents are dealing with trauma and stress and can unfortunately translate their stress and trauma to young people through violence and other forms of abuse. And, being, quarantined in a home with an adult that has trauma that they're working to manage on their own can create many challenges for young people to have to navigate through that. And of course, that was also extremely difficult, I think, for many young people that we were engaged with and exposed to in the work that we were involved in. I mean, imagine a parent that lost their job, that they can't provide for their child, and being forced to figure out a way, very difficult to manage. And then also too, I would say, with everything that is happening with Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and the storming of the Capitol and all of these other challenges, to be in a position where you're forced to observe it happening on television on a consistent basis, and not being positioned in a way to find a way to understand, to unpack what is happening, and to have to constantly experience that over and over again. Of course, that was definitely painful and frustrating for many young people. And so, those are some of the three of the things that we've observed that have been very difficult for young Black youth and historically disinvested youth of color.
Thanks. Anyone want to? Well, here's a question from the audience. My family and I have had some tension rising since the pandemic that was bad as is before. Who can we go to individually to conquer anxiety and doubt? And what fun activities can we partake in as a whole for at home? Anybody want to address that? Dr. Zaff?
Yeah, I mean, now we're in this really unique time now where, according to the CDC and other experts, where you can be outside now. You can actually, the mask, I think we're still on that edge. We're still in that transition phase. but there's nothing like a Mother Nature pill, like getting out, especially as we enter into the season here in Georgia. There's apple picking coming up, there's strawberry picking, there's, you know, whatever. Just get out to a park, get out into nature, do a hike, do something. There's just, you know, Atiba mentioned just cycling, just being active, but you'll find nature, sunlight, activity, that takes a lot of the steam out of the kettle for a lot of folks, and we're now at a really unique time where we can do more of that with the reduced mask mandates and with the weather improving.
Wonderful. That's such a great suggestion. Anybody want to add anything?
Well, I'll add and also I think answer the next question. There are a lot of resources for teens and adolescents via apps, stress management apps, and I don't want to name any. I don't want to pick any above any others, and they're quite helpful. And I think just learning mindfulness, breathing, some meditation as a family, doing that together. I know it might seem silly, and might kind of cause some laughs, but even the laughs and trying to meditate as a family could produce some stress relief, right? My kids think it's hilarious when I try and get into some yoga poses, so they laugh at me. But I think, you know, as parents, as adults, we have to be creative. We have to create with our kids. We have to build things with our kids. We have to get back to doing more and not just, you know, looking at our phones as a source of relieving stress. But apps, there are some good stress reduction apps and breathing apps that children and adolescents can get to, of course, with the permission of their parents, but anybody can use them and a lot of them are free.
So you could just find them on Google, relaxation apps?
Yeah, if you just type in anxiety apps or stress reduction apps, there are so many, and there's a few that are really good. Some cost money, but some are just basic breathing, meditation, mindfulness. Even on YouTube, which I hope I can say, you can just YouTube a mindful video and watch that. So there's a lot of free resources if you have internet or a phone.
Yeah. Here's another question from the audience. What resources or advice is there for kids who don't have the ability to be open with their parents? And I'll wager that is the majority. Can they express their feelings instead of burying them when they have unsupportive? How can they express their feelings instead of burying them when they have unsupportive parents? Who wants to take that one?
I can answer this one. My first suggestion for everyone is to pick up a pen and paper and do some journaling. That has always helped me, and I'm glad that a mentor of mine told me to start doing it long before the pandemic. So I just picked up that habit of either daily journaling or sometimes weekly, and it just helps me to relieve stress, get everything out. Even if I don't know what I'm saying, it's okay because it's just me that's going to read the journal. But also for young people who don't have supportive parents, I would definitely suggest finding a trustworthy adult. Maybe this is a teacher or a high school guidance counselor, or a relative, just someone who you can be transparent with, especially if you're feeling like you cannot trust yourself to cope properly independently anymore.
Youth ministries might be able to be helpful. Yeah. Does anyone want to add to that? No, I'll go on to the next question. Is anyone aware about differences in mental health needs for youth in urban areas versus rural areas? That's an interesting question. Who can answer that?
I can talk about rural areas. That's an area that Mercer's mission is really focused on. And I think, one of the things we've noticed from COVID is that there's such a difference in just having resources, mental health resources and medical resources in rural areas. Georgia has a lot of medically and mental health underserved communities. Almost all of our counties have mental health shortages. And so I think that, with lack of transportation, the thing you have to access is telehealth. And thank goodness We have had some policy changes and some law changes that allow for more telehealth to be used, because then you don't have to be limited by where you live. You just are limited by your access to the internet, which Abida pointed out is another barrier. So there's definitely differences in rural areas, but there are differences in urban areas. I'm sure others here could talk more about that are problematic too.
Could you just explain more what you mean by telehealth?
Yeah, so telehealth to me is kind of like what we're doing here, is, you know, having either on a phone or on a computer the ability to connect with a mental health provider, a counselor, or a medical provider. And it's really easy. The programs now, the software now is, as a non-advanced person in her 40s, I can use it. And so you click the right button, you get pulled up, and it just has made such a difference. I do a lot of work in postpartum anxiety and depression, and for women who are at home with newborns, it has just given them so much hope, so much access to somebody they need to talk to. So it's really a game changer.
Okay, so the people who are watching here, can I assume that they'll know what you're talking about and know how to access it?
That's a good question. They may not. So when you are looking for help, I think the main question is to ask, when you call an office, do you offer telehealth visits? And I would be surprised at this point if most, if not all, offices don't offer that now during COVID.
But I mean, how do you get to an office? What office?
If you're seeking out mental health, you know, if you call an agency or an
so you Google mental health agency.
Mm-hmm. Most of them offer telemental health as part of their services now.
Okay. All right, here's a question. In the Black community, we often go to the pastor or minister before going to a mental health professional. How do we better address that? It's the issue of mental health stigma. Who wants to address that question?
Well, I think it's going to be important for the faith community to be more willing to refer people who need mental health assistance to mental health agency and support. You know, you'd be surprised how congregations in many ways are little communities that have various assets and various professionals, you know, to really try to do a kind of an asset map of their house of worship to see first if they have any mental health support inside of the house of worship. And if not, you know, I think that's one of the things I think is just really important. I mean, it's almost similar to what we did in the, you know, late 80s and early 90s around AIDS and HIV, you know, really engaging the faith community and really positioning them with the right information and relationships so they could really be a conduit for support and help. I think we have to do the same thing for mental health. And I also think, though, that, you know, from my personal opinion, you when it comes down to health, you can't separate the physical from the metaphysical. You can't separate the body from the spirit. And so whether it's Christianity or any other type of faith tradition that you embrace, I think that we have to be more committed to supporting the spiritual health of our young people, and helping them to understand that that there is a way to manage the physical challenges and the mental health that they're facing by being in a position to find their way of connecting to a higher power and to their higher selves, and really leveraging that as well as a way to navigate through some of the mental challenges that they're facing every day.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, Nathaniel. Yes, Atiba. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay. You can tell that Nathaniel is a native son of Atlanta. And I'm not. I actually was born and raised in New York. And I love my mother, but she sent me to an all-boys Catholic high school. And I was one of, you know, a few Black students, and I hated it. But that very first year, we had the option of taking a health class. religion class or peer group counseling. And I signed up for peer group counseling. And as a result of that, I became a peer group counselor. And I just wanted to share that as an example, because to me, I think we do need to help train teenagers to be peer support for their fellow friends and other young people, because you don't need to always go to an adult to help you deal with some of these issues of adolescence.
Thank you for that. Here's a question. As a teenager, community is definitely important. How do you think we can try to build one while stuck at home?
Facebook.
Facebook, okay.
I think the adults. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Okay, I can speak on this one really quickly. But I know that Zoom has been very helpful to me, as well as FaceTime and just catching up with old friends. We're so lucky to be living in an age of technology where we have like all of these online resources to be able to connect with people. So just texting people and saying, hey, like this might be random, but do you want to FaceTime and catch up? Or even Netflix offers Netflix parties to stream movies and TV shows together. Just being creative with the online resources that we have, and also being fearless in the pursuit of community, because it is hard, but we all desire to be relational. We're all relational beings, so we all desire that community. It's important to feed our spiritual and mental and even physical health with community. So definitely just being fearless in the pursuit of that, and using and exhausting all of the online avenues.
You know, one thing that I've known that people have done that I'm aware of is book clubs, online book clubs. Everybody reads the same book and then they discuss it online. And that's a great way to build community. Does anybody want to add anything else? Yes, Sophia.
I love what you said, Tiffany. My friends and I did so much of that at the beginning of the pandemic. The Netflix parties, we'd watch a movie together and we would just send voice notes on our phones, and it kind of felt like we were all in the same room. And to your point, Jane, I also joined a Zoom book club. I'm over 21. I joined a wine club on Zoom. Felt like I was learning. And I must say, I think that to your earlier question, actually, about what do we want to hold on to from the pandemic? My hope, as we talk about the things that we are examining as a society, the sort of veils being pulled back and what we're seeing about inequity, my hope is that we hold on to these lessons of accessibility as we move out of COVID-19 over the next year or 2 years or however long this takes, because while we're confronting racism and sexism, we have to confront ableism in our culture as well, and what online access has done for so many people. And to your point, Natiba, as we get this infrastructure bill through and more rural communities have broadband, people can participate online. We can build these online communities in ways we never have been able to before. And so I hope that youth is taking advantage of that. And, you know, as a person who used to be a very angsty and self-conscious teenager, who's like still maybe an angsty and self-conscious adult, if you reach out to someone, as Tiffany mentioned, and say, hey, do you want to get on a Zoom or a FaceTime this week? And people can't, reach out again. Don't take one scheduling conflict or one not responded to text message as some judgment that people don't want to talk to you. They might just be busy or doing homework or on a Zoom class already, and then they forget. So keep up with your fearlessness, as Tiffany so brilliantly said, and just request community, because people out there are looking for community too.
Thank you, Sophia. How can adolescents deal with bullying and cyberbullying still happening during the pandemic? This is from my friend Kat Kramer.
I'll speak on that. From a person that was bullied from the 3rd to the 8th grade for 5 years, dealing with that specific situation, it's not easy. And it preys on your self-confidence, your self-esteem. And I completely understand where people are coming from, which is why I love to speak on it. I think that it goes back to the answer to the previous question that I think Allie asked earlier. You have to get involved and you have to learn how to express yourself, whether it's through art, through painting, through writing or poetry. I know I found a safe space through liberal arts, such as writing, public speaking, talking about my experiences. And then it also starts with having that safe space in that community at home. If you're able to communicate with a trusted adult or a trusted parent about your feelings, and you're able to not be a subject of judgment, or you're just able to be aware of your surroundings and everything, I feel that if you're able to communication is your best aspect, your strongest ally at that point, and making sure that you don't shut yourself out. And when you start to draw back, remember your why. Make sure that you understand that you're a person and you're worthy of love and you're worthy of self-confidence, but make sure that you try to channel your anger, your sadness through art, because I think that that's the most that speaks to people. When people are driven, when they're angry, when they're sad, and they choose to share their story through poetry or through life or through speech, I think that they reach more people on a deeper and more personal level and a more interpersonal level that will allow other people to start speaking out, whether it be about mental health, whether it be about awareness, whether it be about domestic violence, abuse, or anything. I think that when you channel your frustrations or your anger into your art, then it imitates the best picture of life.
Wow, you must have a wonderful mother.
I do. I really do.
Holy moly. Shiva, can we do the serenity prayer?
Of course.
Everyone on this call to just sit with their feet on the ground, close their eyes, and let's hear the serenity prayer and really allow ourselves to relax into it.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Amen. How important those words are. Boy. I don't see any more questions from audiences, but I'm not sure how much more time we have. But is there a silver lining in all this for youth? I want to hear from all of you. But Sophia, you want to start? A silver lining for youth.
Did you say for you or youth?
Youth. Youth.
My hope is that this silver lining for young people in a year that's been full of so much suffering and hardship is that the starkness of the revelation of inequity, the clarity with which we've all been forced to look at which of our systems are broken and how that brokenness doesn't fit with this narrative of American exceptionalism, will motivate all of us to do the work for our young people so that they are not tasked with fixing these problems in their 30s and 40s and 50s and 80s. Because to your point, Jane, we've been doing this a long time. We've been fighting so many of these battles on repeat. And my goal is that my goal for myself in my work and my activism, and my hope for us as a collective, is that we get truly progressive, truly concerned with community, that we work for the people who are the most underrepresented and the most disenfranchised, knowing that solving problems for them not only increases the kindness of our humanity, but also that rising tide will lift all ships. We all will get better and healthier and more prosperous. That is my hope in terms of the notion of a silver lining.
The rising tide lifts all boats, except we have to cut the ropes that are attaching some of those boats
yes.
to the bottom of the ocean.
Yes.
But some of them won't rise otherwise. Yeah. You know, I really do believe that a lot of, especially white Americans, had their hearts opened with empathy for the first time at how profound the the economic inequality is in this country. You know, when people stood outside and banged pots and applauded our frontline workers, most of whom are people of color, many of whom are immigrants, and we realized so many, even if they were sick, even if they had COVID, they couldn't stay home because they wouldn't be able to support their families, that they had no choice and they weren't being given protective equipment. And I think a lot of people's eyes were really open to that. And I hope that we can pass that empathy to our children so that we understand how we're all in this together. It's not a zero-sum game. Does anyone want to add anything?
For me, I know we're closing out. I would probably tell youth out there that we're not common, that we're comets. And we are all making craters everywhere, letting us know that something great happened there. I want them to know that there is commonality and individuality. So be yourself, share your story, and just know that no one else can do you better than you can do yourself. So be yourself.
I want to thank you to the panel. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you to our viewers. GCAPP has a series of new mental health tools in its Parents Toolkit, a number of tips for getting conversations started when you don't know quite what to say or ask. So you can go to gcapp.com and there's plenty there for parents and others. This is almost it for this year's State of Adolescents, but you know, we have our Empower Party coming up. It's going to be great. Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, is going to interview me and Lily Tomlin. Jewel is going to entertain. Trisha Yearwood is going to host. And we have 2 names of winners of the Empower Party virtual seats. And they are winner number 1, Pamela Brooks, Georgia Primary Care Association. Congratulations, Pamela. Winner number 2, Kaisha Etienne, Elite Scholars Academy in Clayton County Schools. Congratulations, Kaisha. And so that does it for this year. I hate to say goodbye. Again, thank you all. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to the audience. I hope you learned as much as I did and enjoyed yourselves, and I'll see you next year. Stay safe.